Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dylan Rodriguez. I'm the co-director of the Center for Ideas and Society. I'm professor in the Department of Black Study, the newly formed Department of Black Study. That's right, in the Department of Media and Cultural Studies here at UC Riverside. It's a privilege to welcome all of you to Black Liberation and Revolutionary Struggle Now, a roundtable conversation with Sekou Odinga. Applause. I'd like to thank the co-sponsors of this event, Departments of English, History, and Black Study. I'd like to thank the Blackness Unbound Faculty Commons, ASUCR, that's the student government, and the ASUCR External Affairs Office. I give special thanks to Professor David Lloyd in English and UCR undergrad student and activist Amina Hearns, who's also the ASUCR Vice President of External Affairs and Chair of the UC Student Association. I'm proud to facilitate today's roundtable as part of a series of activities that I'm curating through the Decolonizing Humanism programming stream at the Center for Ideas and Society. I'd like to open this occasion by acknowledging Rupert and Jeanette Costo's legacy of reclaiming, protecting, and sustaining indigenous presence at UC Riverside, including epistemological, archival, and physical forms of indigenous thought and being. The University of California is a settler colonial institution that occupies unceded land and ecologies continuously inhabited by original and ongoing human, the Cahuilla, Tongva, Luiseño, and Serrano peoples. This colonial institution continues to be populated by indigenous, Aboriginal, and First Nations peoples from all over the world, many of whom are among faculty, students, and staff. UC Riverside is blocks away from the site where the Riverside Police Department stole the life of 19-year-old Taisha Miller not long before I started working here. The Riverside County Sheriff's Department, with which the university has a cooperating police relationship, is regionally and nationally notorious for creating cruel and fatal conditions in local jails for people who are awaiting trial and can't afford bail. It's a shared responsibility to address how the University of California is actively complicit in long and ongoing histories of anti-Black state and state-condoned violence. It's thus with a sense of urgent obligation that I offer these words in place of the sanctioned so-called institutional land acknowledgement. I'm honored to open this precious occasion by urging all of us to build on Rupert and Jeanette Costo's example by seeking old and new ways to create decolonized, abolitionist, and liberated futures. Welcome. I'll continue with a short introduction of our roundtable participants, followed by an attempt to offer a short political biography of our honored guest, Sekou Odinga. I'm pleased to welcome, and y'all raise your hands just so folks know who you are. I'm pleased to welcome Vonya Quarles from Starting Over and All of Us or None. Terrence Stewart, who earned his BA and master's degree at UCR and is a national organizer with Time Done and one of the founders of the Riverside chapter of All of Us or None. Amanda Soto, UCR undergraduate student, Underground Scholars. Alejandra Olvera, UCR undergraduate student, Cops Off Campus. Steph Jones, UC Riverside and UC President's postdoctoral fellow. These are the folks who have graciously agreed to be in conversation with Sekou Odinga today, so I'm grateful to them. Of course, it is a privilege to welcome our guest of honor. Sekou Odinga, whom you will often hear referenced with love and deep respect by loved ones and comrades as Baba Sekou, is a globally recognized Black liberation activist, member of Malcolm X's Organization of Afro-American Unity, founding member of both the New York City chapter and the international section of the Black Panther Party, and former US political prisoner who survived over 3 decades of state captivity and violence before his release in 2014. Prosecuted and persecuted as one of the Panther 21 in New York City, Baba Sekou is a prominent historical figure, having been featured in numerous documentaries, concerts, mass public events, and major news outlets. In addition to being featured in the widely circulated social movement texts, Can't Jail the Spirit, published 2002, and Hauling Up the Morning, published in 1990, he has published his own writing in Look for Me in the Whirlwind, From the Panther 21 to 21st Century Revolutions, published by PM Press in 2017, and Black Power Afterlives, The Enduring Significance of the Black Panther Party, published by Haymarket Books in 2020. A survivor of state torture and the FBI's notorious Counterintelligence Program, COINTELPRO. How many of the students in here know about COINTELPRO, Counterintelligence Program? Okay then, this will be an introduction for many of you. Sekou Odinga is celebrated and admired by freedom and justice movements worldwide, exemplifying persistence, courage, and principled adherence to freedom struggle under the most repressive circumstances imaginable. A collective of attorneys and activists organized under the Human Rights Research Fund wrote about the FBI's counterintelligence program in an excellent book called Let Freedom Ring. The 2008 edition is a little over 900 pages long, and I think it's required reading for all of us. I refer to their chapter to remind us of the historical context of Baba Sekou's persistence against the most vicious anti-Black repressive machinery of the US state. The chapter reads in part, and I'm quoting, "The FBI's COINTELPRO served to disrupt and destroy the Black liberation movement in many progressive organizations in the US, a secret. But Senate investigations exposed it in 1975. On September 14, 2000, Representative Cynthia McKinney from Georgia, who sat on the Human Rights Subcommittee of the House International Affairs Committee, convened a forum to examine the legacy of COINTELPRO. It was held during the Congressional Black Caucus's Legislative Conference. And the title of the panel McKinney convened was Human Rights in the United States, the Unfinished Story of Political Prisoners and Victims of COINTELPRO. One of the panelists at Representative McKinney's forum further stated that, and again I'm quoting, "The counterintelligence program involves institutions that interact and relate to each other for one purpose, to oppress communities of color and poor communities in this country and to make sure that a vanguard never succeeds in liberating those people. A number of institutions carry out counterintelligence. The courts take political activists and fighters for justice and criminalize them. They take freedom fighters from our communities and call them criminals. But in many ways, the most important institution that carries out this process is the so-called private, really state-controlled media. The media function as a propaganda organ of the state, coloring the political prisoners as criminals, when in fact they are valiant revolutionary soldiers fighting on behalf of oppressed people. It is necessary for the media to paint these people as criminals because political prisoners have the ability to tell the truth and expose this system. It is in the state's interest to silence political prisoners, to prevent the public from listening to their words and understanding their actions," end quote. Of course, what I would add here is that despite the wretched machinations of the counterintelligence program and the FBI, the state's attempt to silence and repress never fully works. In an essay published in 1990, in the middle of the time when he was being held captive by the US government as a political prisoner, Baba Sekou Odinga wrote a piece titled, "Why Struggle?" The opening lines read as follows, and I quote, "The question should be, why not struggle? Struggle in the political context that I use it in is the act of opposing oppression in any form through some conscious activity geared to end or lessen that oppression. It can be violent or nonviolent in form. Obviously, just the act of struggling will not necessarily end oppression. But without struggling, we can be almost assured that the oppression will at least continue. To effectively struggle, we must make a correct analysis of the true nature of our oppression and come up with correct tactics to combat this oppression," end quote. It's this enduring commitment to liberation that brings Baba Sekou Odinga here today. He is respected and revered among all elements of ongoing Black liberationist, US political prisoner, and POW support, revolutionary, and abolitionist movements around the world. I could go on, but I'm hoping that this short introduction conveys the significance of Sekou Odinga's visit to this space. Dare I say that this university and this campus in particular do not deserve him. Do not deserve him. I think we deserve him, but I don't think this place deserves him. Although I'm glad we could make use of this institution in this space to create this conversation, because those who are fighting for or trying to figure out how to fight for liberation, that is Black liberation, urgently need this time with him. Please help me welcome Baba Sekou Odinga. So folks, just a note on how we're going to proceed. We have until 2 o'clock. We're going to start with some opening comments by Baba Sekou, followed by an initial series of thoughts and questions from our roundtable participants. If we have time near the end, we'll open the floor to some limited audience thoughts and questions. And again, with gratitude to all of you for being here. Thank you so much. I'm humbled to be here with you. Let me pass the mic to Sekou Odinga for opening thoughts and comments.
Okay. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. Greetings. Assalamu alaikum. Peace. Abadigani, or however, greetings everyone. I'm happy to be here. Thank you, Dylan, for such a nice introduction. I appreciate it. I don't know if I deserve it all, but anyhow, thank you. I'm just going to start by telling you my name is Sekou Odinga. I'm from New York City. I'm a longtime activist there. As the professor mentioned, I was a founding member of the Black Panther Party in New York and in Algiers, Algeria International Section. Today, I'm part of a couple of organizations that I work with. One of them I'm rocking here is Holla. Actually, I'm not an actual part of it. I work with the young folks in this here organization. I wanted to rock their organization, so they'll love seeing it. You know, I'm a founding member of the Northeast Political Prisoner Coalition, and I work with the Spirit of Mandela Coalition. Most of my work lately have been with the Spirit of Mandela Coalition. One of the things I want to say before I mention them again is the Northeast Political Prisoner Coalition is an organization that was organized to bring together people and organizations that work for the release of our political prisoners and prisoners of war. A lot of us forget that we do have political prisoners, prisoners of war. We are one of the few countries where people have struggled for liberation that don't recognize their political prisoners. And that's something we need to rectify. We really must get to know who our political prisoners are. Why are they political prisoners? What was the work they did that made them political prisoners? And demand their freedom. They fought for us. They sacrificed for us. They've been in prison, a lot of them from 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, for their struggle for our liberation and all oppressed people's liberation. Some of them, like Kamal Siddiqui, was the father of, for those of you who might know, Assata Shakur. He was the father of her only child. They tried to get him to set her up so they could go and capture her. And because he refused, and when he refused, they told him, if you don't work with us, we're going to lock you up for the rest of your life. And sure enough, when he refused, they came up with a 20-something-year-old case, convicted him of it, because who could remember where they were 20 years ago and who was around them at 20 years ago. But anyhow, they found him guilty of killing some police in Atlanta, Georgia, 20 years before his trial, and found him guilty, locked him up, and in fact gave him a life sentence. And he's now rotting in them prisons. He's very sick. He has a lot of medical problems. It's really death by incarceration. That's what they have sentenced him to. So we need to know who he is. We need to know who Mumia is. We need to know who Ed Pondexter is. We need to know who Jojo Bowers is, who Veronza Bauer is. These are brothers that have worked most of their young lives and spent the rest of their lives in prison. All of them that I mentioned have been in prison 20 plus years. You know, some of them 40 plus years, you know. So that's the work I'm really involved in, is trying to get people to understand that we do have political prisoners and prisoners of war, to support those political prisoners, prisoners of war, support their families, and to demand their release. Another organization that I'm working with now is the Spirit of Mandela. The Spirit of Mandela Coalition is a coalition of activists and organizations and people who came together to continue the work of charging this country, the United States government, with genocide. In 2021, we held a tribunal in New York at the Malcolm X Betty Shabazz Center, where there were invited a group of international jurists to sit and listen to the evidence and the witnesses to the 5 charges that were brought against the United States. I had them kind of written down. I don't see them right there. But they were like racial violence against black, brown, indigenous people, police violence and murder of black, brown, and indigenous people, hypermass incarceration and political imprisonment of black, brown, and indigenous people, environmental racism, and health inequities of black, brown, and political and indigenous people. And after listening for three days of the evidence and witnesses, the jurors found them guilty of genocide. So from that grew out another program called the People's Senate. The People's Senate is something that we thought would be a good vehicle to try to unify people in the country. What it basically, in short, I'm gonna try to say it to you in short, is that we are asking people in the different areas of their work, in the different regions of the country, to get to know those who are working and struggling in your area and come together to aid each other and create an agenda within your region that you can all work on, that you can agree 2 or 3 or 4, whatever many areas that you want to work on in, and elect or select someone to represent your area in a national coalition. So we are trying to, what's the word I want to use here? Use this as an organizing strategy to unify folks in the country. We always talk about we need unity. So we're trying to create a vehicle where people can unify and work together and come together in a national coalition and agree on some national strategies and work nationally to bring those strategies to fruition. So I'm going to stop there. I could go on about a lot of other things that we're doing, but I'll pass it to whoever's next.
Papa Sekou, we're going to make sure you continue to go on for the next 90 minutes. So I'm going to ask Vonya to ask the opening question from the roundtable.
Thank you, Baba Sekou. And thank you doesn't say enough. In light of everything that you've survived, everything that you've built, everything that you see now, thank you. Just seems a little empty, but that's the best I have. I'll meet up with y'all again. But what I wanted to ask about was, how can you tell the difference between organizing and reacting, and how do we organize to build a narrative that better defines who the people are? Oftentimes we seem to be in a flurry, putting out one fire after another and reacting to crisis. And I don't know if that's sustainable or not, or if there's any differences that you can share with us to let us know if we're reacting or organizing, and what we can do to build a narrative that better explains to the world who the people are.
Good question. I think when we talk about organizing, we have to kind of put some structure to it, so that if we talk about an organization, we talk about this organization exists here for these reasons. We have an agenda, we have a program for this here organization, especially if we talk about revolutionary left-leaning organizations, which are the ones I'm most concerned about. You have to have some kind of structure, some kind of do's and some don'ts, so that everyone is under the same, on the same page. I think one of the things that is missing today in our organizing is the real organizing face-to-face, people-to-people. You know, most of it now is done on one of these, machines. But if you want to get down and dirty, as they say, you got to get out and meet the people. You got to get out and work with the people. The people have to be able to look you in the eyes and see your sincerity and feel your spirit, and be able to ask you questions, and so you can explain what it is that you want to do, what it is you try to organize, how you're going to do this, and be able, like y'all do with me, ask me questions. How you doing this? How you going to do that? Well, you have to be there. That's how you organize. You really have to be there talking to them, not just run out when somebody get beat up and say no more, and then go back until it happened again and say, come back and say no more again. But you have to build something that is sustainable, that people can say, all right, these are the problems here. We have to get rid of the problem. If the police violence is the problem, well, then we have to rethink what policing is in our communities. And we have to organize our community to be able to say, no, you're not doing it right. This is not what we want. We demand that our taxes get this done. That we have mental health people come when there's a problem in the house. We have spiritual people come to talk to our youth. And we don't need people with guns to come to break up a fight. We don't need people with guns to come and mediate between me and my wife. We need other people who have been trained to be able to do these type of things. And the incarceration thing, I think we have to rethink, well, I guess I'm going on a little further than I wanted to, but we have to rethink jails. We have to rethink prisons. It ain't working. This doesn't stop nothing. We've been locking us up ever since they let us off the plantation. They've been locking us back up and working us, enslaving us in these prisons, But it is not stopping people from recidiving, coming back again and again. So we have to rethink all these things. We have to sit down and use our brain thrust to decide a better way to make our neighborhoods, our areas safe, other than what we have, because it ain't working.
Let me throw it over to Amanda and then to Steph after that.
Thank you for that. So now as we start to organize the movement and everything, how would you say, how do we build on the movement that involves like varying degrees of on the political spectrum? So if you have people who are, say like more like prison reformists, and then you have people who are prison abolitionists, where do you see, or do you think it's possible to continue to build a movement that has different ideologies?
Yes, I think it is. I think it's possible. If there's the will there. That's basically what we're asking people to do, is come together. And when you talk about prison abolition and prison reform, there ain't that much difference, because you're going to have to start reforming before you abolish it anyhow, So it's like take it from one step to the next, But yeah, I think it's very important that people who thinking about prisons come together and share their ideas and share their work ethics to bring about what they can agree on needs to be done.
follow-up to that, sorry if you couldn't hear me. As a follow-up to that, how do you stay vigilant from like having infiltrators or people who want to harm and like co-opt the movement, as you have so many different
That's always a problem.
ideologies?
Yeah, that's always a problem. I don't know. I guess one of the things we have to do is get to know who we're dealing with. You know, if you're working with them and you're going out to dinner with them, you're going to each other's houses, you're sitting in meetings, you kind of get to know who's feeling, who's thinking, what way. And a lot of times, though, they will hide what their real goals are. So you just got to be vigilant. You got to take the time to get to know people. Who knew him 5 years ago? Who knew him 10 years ago? What was he doing 10 years ago? What was she doing 5 years ago? Where else has she worked? He worked, you know. So we have to take the time to vet each other, to get to know each other, and you know, it's still some of them going to get in, you know. So the main thing is to have a structure where your goals are set and that you're working towards those goals. And so when they get in, anything that goes against those goals, you know that's no good, you know.
Yes, thank you so much. Honored to be here. Again, thank you for everything that you have survived. My question, this generation sort of has a pretty unique problem with the development of technology and social media, that we both are dealing with these very severe levels of genocide alongside a ton of propaganda about progress, a ton of propaganda about civility. And how might you suggest we really deal with those messages of, you know, these mechanisms that are performing this genocide are really to progress our society and to make us as a society better and more civil?
I'm not sure I grasp your question there. You're asking me how, make it a little simpler for me.
So in thinking through, we can use prison reform for an example. There is a ton of information out there that the reason we have the development of prisons is because we just got to get rid of those crazy folks, right? We got to get these criminals off the street. We got to get the criminals out of our neighborhood. Propaganda, right? And there's all of this nonstop messaging around civility. We can go to, you know, our politics these days. You know, all of the conversations are around progress. All of the conversations are about bringing our society up. And that messaging doesn't stop. But at the same time, we're also seeing so much genocide. And the genocide is being defended. It's being defended as something that is good for us. So how might we really deal with both the propaganda and dealing with how to conceptualize the genocide and think through what genocide looks like for us?
I guess I would say, like Kwame Ture used to say, organize, come together, you know, talk about what it is that you want to do and organize to get it done. Again, as we started with her question, we need to come together among ourselves and create the type of structures that will allow us to do whatever it is that we decided we want to do, whether it's around education, police brutality, prisons, you name it. Whatever the problems that you're identifying, then you have to sit down. We have the brain thrust to create programs and solutions to our problems. But first you want to create the structure that will allow you to sit down and organize your thoughts, organize your activities to get the job done, whatever that is. If you talked about prison, what is it that you want done with prison? Is it like she said, is reform, or abolition, whichever one you decide you want to come up with a program to reform it. How do you come up with that program to reform? You sit down and you talk about it. You talk to people who've been dealing with it throughout the years. That's their area of work. You talk to them and you come up with an agreement on, all right, this is our goal. This is how we're going to create a solution to reach this goal, to deal with this problem. So it's all about organizing, coming together with people who thinking like you or who wanting to do some of the same things you want to do and making it happen, on a personal level. We have to commit. People have to commit to struggle. They have to be willing to sacrifice time, money, energy to make things happen that they want to happen. It's not going to happen without it. It's not going to be there's no easy solutions. We have to be willing to work and create whatever the vehicles that we need to reach the goals that we're trying to reach.
Can I ask a follow-up to your question, Steph? So Baba Sekou, can I ask you to talk specifically about, building on Steph's question, part of this propaganda has to do, for example, at this campus, we're bombarded with it every day. You log onto the UCR website, you see a picture that looks just like this room. You see all kinds of boasting about social mobility and diversity, and everyone here knows it's bullshit. Right? Everybody knows here that this institution is not for us, it is not for you. It is here to, at best, train a managerial class, if that. It's not here to train people on how to analyze and understand the conditions from which they have come to transform them, right? It's all about getting in to make it, according to a kind of corporate language of that. And at the same time, we're messaged with notions of, if you successfully recruit more queer people, women, black and brown people, et cetera, into the police force, into the Democratic Party, shoot into the Republican Party, that's the progress that the people need, however you define the people, right? That this is some pathway towards social justice. And again, everybody knows it's bullshit. Yeah, right? Inclusion into what, right? Exactly. So I think part of what I was thinking about as Steph was asking her question is, none of this is really that new either. You know what I mean? Like, it's not that new. So I think part of what I selfishly, not selfish, I'm asking on behalf of all of us, I think what we need to learn from is that kind of historical lesson. What would you say to us about confronting that propaganda apparatus in a way that will, in a way that will at least decenter it, if not destroy it, right? Because I struggle with this every day.
I guess you have to come up with a opposite now, or a different propaganda, a different narrative. Thank you. We have to politicize ourselves. We talk about political education. We must politically educate ourselves, our students, our families, our communities. We have to set up the apparatus to be able to do that. That's there again. We come into organize. Years ago, when I was part of the Black Panther Party, we had weekly community political education sessions where we would invite the community to come in. We would talk to them about why the education is so bad here, why our children are not learning, why so many of us are getting killed, who's killing us, who's bringing the drugs into the community, things like that. The people know that all that stuff is happening. They just don't know how to end it. And so we have to come up with ways to fight those things, We have to be able to, when we educate ourselves, we got to be able to challenge those who's bringing the drugs into our communities. We got to be able to challenge the school boards. We got to take the time to go to those meetings and say, no, we want this in our curriculum. We want our children to learn this. And you got to organize the community to do that, because they will fight back. They're not going to just allow you to change what they're trying to do. But again, I say it's organized. You got to organize the people. And you got to sell that to the people that you must be willing to sacrifice for what you want. You got to give something. You got to give some time. You got to give some effort. You got to give you a couple of dollars even. You got to give some of you to make this happen. If you don't, it can't happen. You got to be willing to sacrifice. That's why I was talking about earlier about our political prisoners. They sacrificed. They've given all of everything they had. Most of us come home. I come home with nothing. Well, I came home with something. I come home to a beautiful wife that had worked hard to help me get there. But that's what we need. We need something for us. We have to build. They built something for me to come home to. They built an organization to demand my freedom, to raise money to help me get into the courts. So that's how I eventually won, is I got into the courts, and that brought me home 20 years earlier than they had planned for me to come home. Yeah, well, I was supposed to go to the board, not even be released, but just go to the board in 2033. But I was able to force them to release me in 2014, which was very good. Because of people like her organizing organization, they literally had to create the organization because it wasn't there. And then they had to set the goals, and then they had to get the people who were willing to sacrifice to make it happen. And from what I was being told every day, it was a struggle. It was a struggle to do it all. So what I'm saying basically is we have to organize. We have to be willing to sacrifice, and we have to get folks, especially the young folks. Most of us, when we got involved, we were very young. I was 19 when I first got involved, But if you look at all the really strong revolutionary organizations, most of them, like SNCC, the Black Panther Party, Revolutionary Action Movement, those type of organizations were all started by youngsters. People, they were either in their teens or 20s, And so that's what we need. We need the youth. We need the youth not only to work, but to lead. That's, we have to encourage them and let them know that you have the ability to lead. And you should accept that responsibility and lead us on to the next level. Every generation has a responsibility to make this a better world than they came into. And if they don't, you fail. I don't care how much money you made or whatever else, how big you went into your chosen field. If you don't make this a better world, and if you don't work towards making this a better world, then when you come in it, you failed. So, and we have to get our youth to buy into it. In my day, our youth wanted to buy into it. We didn't have to force it. We was fighting to get in the doors. I can remember when we started the Black Panther Party, it started with 10 or 12 of us, and the next week it was 100. The week after that, it was 600. And the week after that, it was more than the space could handle. We had to branch out and open up different sections within the city. Because the youth wanted to work. They wanted to make it a better world. Today, I think they still want to. They just don't see it happening and don't see themselves being the ones to make it happen. But we got to let them know that they are the ones. They're the ones we've been waiting on. You guys, you're the ones. We've been waiting on you. We know you can do it, and we're expecting you to do it. And now they got to accept that challenge. They got to be willing to say, all right, I'm going to accept my challenge. I'm going to step up. I know a brother. I know a sister. I know somebody else like me who want to do this. I'm going to talk to them about joining such and such an organization or creating such and such an organization. So it,
I mean, yeah, just during lunch, Terrence and I were talking, and we were sharing the notion that you can have all the knowledge in the world, but if you don't have an analysis, you're not going anywhere.
yeah.
You know, so I appreciate that. And I can think of no better segue to Alejandra, your question, because Alejandra has convened the student chapter of UC Riverside Cops Off Campus. For folks here that want to know more about it, shout out to Cops Off Campus. Talk to Alejandra after this session if you need to know more. I'm privileged to be connected to you for that. But Alejandra, you had something you wanted to share with us.
Of course, yeah. Definitely talk to me after if y'all are interested in that, because I really do appreciate you saying that, because I feel like right now there's a lot going on in my head right now, especially after like what we've just discussed. But I think I'm going to delve into a little bit more of like I wanted to talk about maybe like if we can envision like the emotional side of all of this, like the emotional side of organizing and like what it means to us as people. And so my question basically was like, thank you for all of the wisdom that you've brought here today. And I'm really just trying to ask like, what advice do you have for like holding on to and even like harnessing like hope in like the face of repression, especially for like students and like just like young people in this day and age? Like you've talked about like you gave us like really good reasons for in why struggle, right? Like you give us a good reasoning as to like why we struggle. But what does like struggling look like, or like what do you think struggling should look like for us? And like, what do you have to say to us that like are struggling to struggle well, you know? And I know that there probably isn't a good way to struggle, is what you might first say, but like, I guess just like getting through it though, too, you know? I guess that's my question.
I don't know. I guess a good way to struggle is sincerely, to come into it. You know, Che Guevara said, revolutionaries are inspired through love. It's for love that they struggle, that they be willing to even give up their life, if it is not love of themselves, but love of the people, you know. So I guess I would say to you is we have to, like I've been saying, we have to be willing to struggle because we love ourselves, because we love our family, because we love our neighbors, because we love our community, because we love ourselves, you know, and we love people. We have to be willing to say, all right, this is my responsibility. If not me, then who, you know? And so, I don't know, you got to work with those around you that are committed to making this a better world, a better situation than we're in, whatever that might be. I don't know if I really answered your question, but
No, you definitely did. Because mostly what I was looking for was like wisdom, which you definitely have given us this whole time. I guess a follow-up question to that, because that was, I think, a really succinct and like just what I think a lot of us need to hear. But I guess, I don't know, a follow-up question, like, is there any, like, I guess, anecdotal, like, how did you get through? I feel like it's maybe a little bit hard to, like, envision yourself organizing as a young person, which I think, like, I even see that in, like, my younger, like, family, like, my nephews, right? It's hard to envision yourself doing it and also getting through. So was there ever any moment where you were, like, you know, I don't know what I'm doing, because I think that's really
yeah, when the police was knocking me upside the head and dragging me off to the prison, yeah, I had some real doubts there. You know, was this really worth it? You know, I was tortured for 6 hours. When I say torture, I mean I was burned with cigars. I was beaten. I had my head flushed down toilets. I mean, they dogged me. I stayed into the hospital for 3 months after they finished beating up on me, you know. So, but I think one of the things is, first of all, is being committed self. You got to really be willing to commit to what I just talked about. I always knew, I was inspired by great men, great women, Queen Mother Moore in New York, Malcolm X. I mentioned Stokely Carmichael earlier, H. Rap Brown, Donald Cox. Different people really, I looked at their lives, I talked to some of them, and they inspired me because they were out there doing it. They were committing. And I said, I want to be like that. I want to do my part. I don't want to just sit back and accept that they're going to free me. I'm going to work to free myself, my family, my community, my neighborhood, my, nation. And another thing I think is that we believed that we could do it. We looked at the rest of the world. Back in the 60s, there were anti-colonial struggles going on all over the world. And we seen them becoming successful. So we believed we was as good as anybody else. We could be successful. And so we committed. We realized by looking at them that a lot of them was dying, a lot of them was going to jails, a lot of them was getting brutalized. But Cuba was freed. Algeria was freed. Angola was freed. South Africa was free. They went through all these things that we were going through, and they did want it. They won their whatever freedom was to them at that point, because some of the revolutions were betrayed. That's the word I'm looking for. Some of them was betrayed, sometimes by their own leaders. But they did run the colonialists out of their areas. They were able to reach their goals, and it was through struggle. So we believed not only were we inspired by them, but we believed that we were as good as anybody else, that we could successfully do. And I think that takes you a long way. Is belief in yourself, belief in your comrades, belief in those that you're working with, that you can create a better world like everybody else in the world has done, or like so many other people in the world have done. We're not no dumber, no weaker than nobody else, so we can do it, And I think that's one of the things that pushed us out there, is that we believed that we were going to be successful, and so we was willing to give it all to become successful.
Even though we were the lion's ear.
Who was that? Okay. Can she say something?
Let me introduce Sekou. I'm sorry, Sekou Dekui, Sister Dekui.
That's my wife to everyone.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. Amanda, I just want to say, to further Sekou's answer for yourself and all and everyone, right? It's understanding what he talked about, commitment, that we have taken it beyond ourselves, right? That we have a responsibility, and that some things, like our ancestors, did not see, but that didn't stop them from struggling. And so we have to align ourselves with the idea, the reality, the principle that we commit our lives and our work to struggle, not because it's about me individually, but it's about we as a nation, right? And so when you take yourself out of it personally, then you understand that the struggle is larger than you, and you might not see that, but you've also contributed to the goal of getting towards there. I think that that's always important, because we live in a me society. We live in individual, right? That's what capitalism does, like what you said about the propaganda. So we have to unlearn some of those things and say we commit our lives to struggle, because I want, as indigenous people believe, for the next 7 generations, what do I want the world to look like for the people that are not yet born, right? So taking it outside of ourselves. So thank you for that opportunity.
I'm gonna throw it over to Terrence.
Yeah, I know. Hey, yeah, like, they beat the question out my mouth, you know? Nah, but, like you just said, all these international places, you know, and a lot of times we hear about the Black Panther Party, we hear about it local, California, well, Oakland and New York. But can you explain to us about the international part of the Black Panther Party?
Okay. The international section of the Black Panther Party was set up to gather information about struggling people around the world and to disseminate information about our struggles here in the United States. So we were welcomed into Algeria, who had just recently won their freedom from the French. And they opened their doors to all struggling people around the world. Not only opened their doors, they invited them. Come set up a shop here. Come set up an office here. There will be other revolutionaries here. You can bounce different ideas and learn how they're fighting in their areas, how their struggles are going, what worked, what didn't work, what might work, you know. So that's what Algiers was for us too. It was a place that we could gather information about all the different struggles going on in South America, in Asia, in Africa, and get information to all these areas from what we were doing here in this here country. You know. So that's basically what we were doing. It was a wonderful experience because I got a chance to meet and work with people from all over, struggling people from all over. And just to go on from what I was saying earlier, it was mostly youth. Revolutions are fought by the youth. It ain't old heads like me. You see very few of them. And most of them are in advisory positions, you know. Most of those who was leading were in their 20s and 30s. You know, those were the ones that were leading. And so, and that was very eye-opening for me. Because one thing about our struggle here in our country, most of our elders don't like to move over. They don't want to get out the way. They want you to come in, but they want to tell you what to do, you know, when you come in. But in other places, they allow the youth to use their mind and to lead. You know, some of the generals that I met were 21 years old that had been in the struggle since they were 13. You know, when I say in the struggle, I'm talking about bang, bang, bang struggle. They were ducking bullets and everything. You know, so they learned to sacrifice at a very early age. And by the time they was 18, 19, 20, they were leaders. Literal leaders out there in the field. So that was really inspiring to me to see so many youth involved in the struggles around the world.
May I ask a follow-up?
Yes, you can.
Yeah, okay, so now we're at the time where the Panthers, SNCC, in some ways the NAACP, we're now getting a lot of media production around that. We've got documentaries, we've got films, we've got some version of books, and there's lots of complaints. How best do you think the media, if at all, can capture the stories of the Panthers? Dylan asked the question earlier around how many folks in here have even heard of COINTELPRO. And there's a lot of folks who don't really know about the international presence of the party. Some folks don't even know about the national presence of the party. So how can we best document these stories fairly and accurately so that we can now see folks have more information about what that movement was about?
Well, one of the things is that it's already been documented by people who were involved. Most of the different chapters around the country, someone has written about it. Someone has made a documentary about it. Research, research. That's the history of what we've done is there. So we have to just research it And then there's still a lot of us still around, you know, old heads like me that was involved in it in different areas of the country. There's a lot still. I mean, most are gone, but there's still a lot around, you know, that you can talk to and ask them questions like you're asking me and get responses from them, you know. The research, reading what's already there, listening to what's already there. When we talk about Malcolm, we listen to his speeches, and we got recordings by Malcolm. I love, even now, listening to him just talk, because it's so relevant today, it's as relevant today as it was in '64 when he was giving those speeches, you know. So I would say, just like I just said, you know, listening to, reading, finding out what we were doing, how we were doing it, it's out there, you know. Many people have written books, you know. I was at a book signing, what was it, Saturday, I guess it was, or Friday or Saturday. D.C., Field Marshal D.C. was the Field Marshal of the Black Panther Party. He was my leadership, actually. He was the one that gave me my marching orders. His daughter was signing a book that he wrote, that she had published. You know, so I say that to say that that information is there. You just have to look for it. If you want it, it won't. And you don't have to look hard. It's not, Google answers a lot of questions, and you know, you just open up your phone, and Google will tell you a lot where to look for a lot of it. You know, the youngsters got me using Google now. When I want to know something, I just open my phone, go straight there. My wife now asks me, "Why don't you Google it?" Because that's I use it. Because a lot of it might not tell you everything, but it give you, it'll aim you in the right direction. You know.
Yo, as far as archives go, as far as information goes, just following with Baba Sekou's point, we're like an hour away from a unique archive, something called the Southern California Library in what used to be called South Central LA. Now they call it South LA. SoCalLIB.org. They have unique archives there that is full of documentation about the Black Panther Party, both the LA chapter and other chapters, and all of the organizations that flowed out of the Black Panther Party. So you are literally an hour away from that archive, as Baba was talking about. Another thing, shout out to Black Power Media. You know what I mean? Yeah. Black Power Media, they have folks like Baba Sekou on there. They have folks like all kinds of folks on there. So the archived information is out there. The stuff that Steph is raising here is available. You know, we can do it on our trips in the car. You know, listen to gems getting dropped on us for 5 and 8 minutes at a time. So like, I'm actually grateful for the work that people are doing around this. Let me pass the mic to Vonya.
Thank you, and thank you again. I cannot fathom organizing and doing the work that you all did without internet, without social media, without Zoom. It's kind of like taking away all the excuses. Like if my Wi-Fi goes down, what does that really have to do with me going and doing some work? But I really am just now, it's dawning on me the vast amount of change that you all brought about. And I don't think it's over. So when I go to Oakland in organizing work, there's still organizing that was shaped based upon the work that was put in the Oakland Bay area with the start of the Black Panthers. And so my question is, for base building and organizing, some of the tools that you all used or created seem to mesh with the community. And so what do you think were the most advantageous ways of organizing community without the media presence?
Face to face.
Yeah.
We used to go lead the. You can't hear me?
Now we can.
I got to speed it up. Huh? We used to have to go out the office. They used to send us out the office. You go down this block, you go on this block, you go on that block, you going on that block, you going on that block, and you talk to people. You knock on doors. You tell them who you are, what you're doing, how it can affect their lives, how you would love for them to come and work with you and tell you what more they think you should be doing. That's how you do it.
And food helps, isn't it?
Well, food was always something that we recognize, that food, shelter, and clothing. People need food, shelter, and clothing. So yes, food really helped. Our Breakfast for Children program, well, that's what what's his name, J. Edgar Hoover said was the most dangerous program in the world, in America, was us feeding children. Of course, not only was it preparing another generation, it was bringing that generation, their mothers and fathers, they appreciated that you were feeding them fresh, good food, you know, and you was taking your time to get up. We had programs dealing with food, shelter, and clothing. We had housing programs. We gave clothes away in the winter. We would gather clothes from the stores in the neighborhood. You want to work, you want to sell in this neighborhood, you got to contribute, you know. You ain't got no seconds that you send back. Your seconds you give to us. We went to the cleaners. After 5 months, 3 months, whatever it is, cleaners will take clothes and just throw them away or give them to, what they call them, that organization? Goodwill and places like that, and then they'll turn around and sell them, you know. So we said, give them to us. We're going to give them clothes away. So we would set up programs where on Saturday you come, we'll have the shoes, the pants, the shirts, the coats, all the different things in sections. You can just go, look for your size, look for something you like, and take it. We wasn't charging that. We had where we used to fill up bags of groceries and give away groceries once a month. You know, we had, like I just said, the food program that we started. And we had where we would go into in New York we got tenements, and like instead of one apartment, you got anywhere from 10 to 30 apartments, and we'd go in and organize them slumlords, slum buildings against the slumlords, you know, and go into the courts, and the courts would permit us to hold back the rent until he fixed up the house. And then the money would go into escrow, and it'd be there whenever he finished getting the building up to par, then the money would be released to him, you know. Some buildings, they refused to do it, and they lost the building. The building was taken from them and given to the people that lived in the buildings. You know, so those were the type of programs that we were coming up with, and we were able to deal with it because we went to the people. We went out of and that's so important, that you get to know your community, and your community get to know you, and trust you. And you know, if you serve in the community, then the community will know that you serving them, because they benefit from your service. You know, so yeah, they will.
Let me throw it over to Steph, and then I think Amanda, you had a great question too about historical figures of Black radicalism.
Yes? Okay. I have a question about pitfalls. Looking back on your time, is there any warning labels you might give us, or missteps that you might warn us from taking?
It's a lot. It's a lot, man. We had a lot of pitfalls. You know, one of the things that I'll tell you that we did wrong was we related to drugs too much. People had a lot of marijuana and alcohol, especially marijuana and alcohol. Those are the two drugs that people overindulged, you know. And even though we had rules against doing it during working hours, it was only supposed to be allowed to wind down after you finish whatever work for the day. But I think it shouldn't have been allowed at all. Now, just looking back on it and seeing some of the problems that came from it, you know. promiscuous sex. It was too much of that, way too much of it. It really.
The 60s or the 70s?
Both. Both. Yeah, both of them, you know. And we had a undercover police that testified in the New York 21 trial. New York 21 was a trial in 1969, 70, 71 that it was the largest based on how much it cost, and the longest trial in New York up until that date, you know. And what it was that the government tried to, and the city, working with the city, they locked up most of the strongest leadership in the Bronx, the Harlem Bronx section of the Black Panther Party, because they were the ones that was most involved. They were doing the things that they wanted to stop, actually. And so what they did is they locked up 21 people, you know, and 14 of them were the leadership of those two chapters. I left. I was able to escape that actual arrest, and I went over to Africa. But one of the officers, one of the police officers that had infiltrated, said that he made it a conscious effort to lay with as many of the women in the party, especially those who had boyfriends or husbands that were involved, that he thought was involved with armed struggle. And his thing was to, during the pillow talk, to get her to talk about her husband. And he used it. So that's an example of how that promiscuous sex hurt us so bad, you know. So I think, and based on that, I've often said, I had my son, who's a Muslim, told me one day, he said, Abu, one of the best things about y'all was that y'all struggled, and the worst thing was about it that you took the creator out of your struggle. You know, if you'd have kept your creator in the struggle, you wouldn't have made so many mistakes. And I agree with that, you know. So does that answer some of your questions?
Thank you for that. You know, you were talking about like the movements from earlier and everything, and I guess my question is like, how do we think of these like historical figures like Fred Hampton, Assata Shakur, and everyone, with placing them in present day and just like the historical continuity and all of that? Because all of what happened back then is still happening now, and I think that a lot of times like the youth and just like a lot of us think of that, oh, that's so long ago, like we can't imagine them in today's day, but in reality, like Fred Hampton would be 75 today. So how do we imagine them in present day?
I think we look at them to where they were then and learn about them and be inspired by them. You know, they were at what age? 21, 22, and they were doing that. And you're now 21, 22, 23. If they could do it then, and you got so much more going for you today than we had. I mean, like she said, she can't even imagine how we struggled without all the information that y'all can get now. So if we could do it back then with the little resources we had, you ought to be able to do so much more. So I'd say use it as inspiration. Learn about Fred, learn about Assata, learn about the different people who were struggling in the 60s and the 70s, and some of what they were doing, you can do exactly that today. Others, you can use it as a guide to create your own, because you can't take the 60s and put it in the 2023. But some of the things, you can get some ideas on how or what needs to be done even. You know, sometimes we don't even know what we think needs to be done. We think that they were doing something special. They were just ordinary people. These were ordinary young people from the hood that wanted to do something better than their fathers, their mothers. You know, they wanted to be a part of the change that they knew needed to become about within our communities. And so they got involved. That's why I got involved. We want to be better, and every generation should want that. Every generation should want to be a part of making the world a better place for themselves, for their families, for their neighborhood, their community, their nation, etc. You know?
So I'm going to jump in out of order because of your kindness. And I want to just ask, who told you, or where did the right to resist, where was that born? And how do we manifest that today? How do we create more awareness and understanding about a right to resist government violence?
I think we all feel that within inside. If I walk up there and smack you right now, you going, what the hell? You know, and you going to go, I mean, so we have within ourselves that we know we have a right to fight back, to defend ourselves. But then who told me? Malcolm told me. When I listened to what he was saying, he was telling us, you got to get up out of your ass and do something. You got, nothing ain't gonna change if you don't get up and do something yourself. We did have, I think that's one of the things that we had that you all don't have. We had real inspiring leadership. We had young brothers and sisters who was telling, I remember Queen Mother Moore, looking at me and telling me just straight up, you need to get up and be a part of changing this world. And this was an old lady at that time. Queen Mother must have been in her late 70s, early 80s at that time. But you know, our elders were telling us that not only can you have to. That's your responsibility, you know. And that's what I said to you all earlier. That's your responsibility. Young folks have a responsibility to be involved in the struggle for a better world. If you don't, you leave it to your children. You know, you betray your children. You betray your grandchildren. You betray your great-grands. If you don't do what you can, and you don't have to bring about freedom, but you have to be involved in trying to bring about it. It ain't gonna happen overnight. You only see incremental advance. But know that that's part of freedom. That's part of the struggle for freedom. A little bit at a time. Everybody got to take a step forward. I took my step forward, it's your turn. You have to take your step forward. And your child needs to take his step forward. So we all have to take a step forward to be a part of our own freedom, our own liberation. You know.
We always feed off of each other. I think that it's also important when Sekou talked about political education, understanding black resistance started on those slave ships, right? People used machetes. They jumped overboard, they threw overboard, they did whatever. They was on those auction blocks and those plantations, right? And throughout history, we had the African Black Brotherhood, we had all of these different organizations. Even in the South, they had armed resistance. The propaganda has taught us, conditioned us to believe that we don't have a right to resist. But if you celebrate Nat Turner, Harriet Tubman, right? All of those people, right? Indigenous people struggled and resisted. So it's not a new phenomenon. We just haven't been taught. So we have disassociated ourselves and disconnected from that long history of armed struggle. And maybe back then, armed struggle was a machete. Right? The struggle was not harvesting the crops. It was all these different ways, but we knew we had a right to resist. They teach us, the oppressor wants to tell us how we should resist. And we have to reject that. And we can only reject that when we know that we have a right to, and we know that we stand on the shoulders and follow in the footsteps of people that resisted in all those kinds of ways.
And just to take that another step forward, they had the international law makes it legal for us to struggle by any means. It makes us, it gives us the right to resist our oppression by any means, including armed struggle. And this country has signed those international treaties, you know, to the protocols from Geneva Conventions of '48 started that. And this country signed it. They got UN, I don't have the sites right now. If anybody who wants them, you can find them. The UN committees against oppression that this country has signed gives us the right to fight by any means. They weren't thinking we were going to use it. They were saying that for the rest of the world to fight it. But they signed those treaties that says that we have that oppressed people have the right to resist their oppression by any means, including arms, and they put that in there. And so it's legal. Everything that the Panther Party was doing was legal. Don't get it wrong. That's what makes those brothers and sisters that were arrested political prisoners, because they were not criminals. That's what they try to criminalize the struggle, but they were not criminals. They were well within international accepted law.
That's right. This is United Nations 45-130. It is called The Right of Peoples to Self-Determination, Struggle by All Available Means, passed by the General Assembly, published in 1990. And also for folks that don't know who J. Edgar Hoover is, some people here might not know. J. Edgar Hoover was the director of the FBI, and he was essentially the architect and the primary administrator and force behind the Counterintelligence Program and many, many, many other horrifically evil and genocidal
Criminal.
Exactly.
Criminal
I mean, we could go down the line, but yeah.
The law, what he was doing.
There are a few figures in the 20th century that are more responsible for the archive of colonial, anti-Black, and other forms of oppressive violence. Let me pass the mic to Alejandra and then Terrence, and maybe we can open up a little bit after that.
All right, so my sort of a follow-up question, but sort of leaning into a different area of thought that I've been thinking about, and I feel like we haven't touched on maybe like so deeply, but is there any, again, I guess asking for advice, like sort of advice for leading, and I don't necessarily even mean like being the head, like honcho, or like being like leading everybody else, but just in a general sense, like leading while organizing, because I think it looks really different than like having a job, like a 9-to-5, and like being a manager, supervisor. So just anything really in that sort of, I think it's different, and it's really hard to grapple with sometimes.
I don't know. I guess leading is difficult. It can be difficult. One of the things I say is always be honorable, truthful, And I mentioned earlier about the love. Put people first. It's about, because if you're leading, you're trying to lead people to a better place. And so you got to be willing to sacrifice, but it's got to come from love. You can't look down on people. You can't be arrogant with your leadership, So it's all about the people, being truthful. That's difficult for some people to be. We used to use what we call criticism, self-criticism, where you accept before somebody even tell you it. I made a mistake with such and such and such. I did so and so and so and so. I shouldn't have did that. The next time I would do such and such and such and such, And if someone bring it up on you first, then you accept. You cop to it. You're right. That was fucked up what I did. I shouldn't have did. Excuse my French. And I shouldn't have did that. In the future, I will do this. you know. And that's very helpful once you can be humble enough to accept criticism and be honest enough to give self-criticism. For an organization, it really helps. It helps the organization really grow and survive and go forward, you know.
You go. I wanted to say like that's a really good answer because I wanted to sort of like follow up with, I feel like right now I'm seeing a lot of just like not a trend, but like definitely like a want to move toward like horizontal leadership, or not feeling like people are so like at the head of everything, which I think is totally like, I love that. But then I also think like there are problems. So I just want to say that's a really good answer to anyone who's like in any organization, because I think like if you lead that way, it doesn't feel like you're pulling everyone along. So thank you for that.
Well, one of the things I believe that is best, especially for any kind of revolutionary organization, is a collective leadership. It's really a problem when if one person is holding everything. Of course, all they got to do is knock that one person off, and everything starts falling. So if we have a leadership committee, you know, we sit down and we make decisions among the committee. We don't. One person don't have the right to just say, "You do this, you do that, you do that. We're gonna do this, we're gonna do that." A collective makes those decisions. You know, so we used to have what we call a central committee, and that was supposed to be their job. But then we had a leadership that got arrogant and thought that it was his job to do it all, to make all the decisions, and we allowed him to get away with it. You can't allow nobody to usher the leadership of everybody. If you have a leadership committee, no matter how intelligent and strong one of the people in that committee is, you can't allow them to become all-consuming. They only they can make the decision. You know, because power corrupts. Absolute power absolutely corrupts, and I've seen it happen. You know, so.
No, sorry, I was just gonna say then it basically, sorry. Sorry, I was just gonna add on to that, just thinking that, because I always think of like a top down, and in many ways it becomes like you become like the oppressor in ways, and you're mirroring your oppressor. And back to like what you were saying about like arrogance and everything. And I think a lot of times, like when it comes to spaces of organizing, like how do you foster growth and people who want to lead or to help lead if you're looking at it in a top-down way versus like let's come together and like collectively decide like how we tackle these things, because you're naturally going to get people who want to lead, but those leaders who are in those positions need to make sure that it's also like very inclusive and collective.
Go ahead, Steph, you had something?
Yeah, I did.
Go.
I was just gonna add that something that also is a struggle is something that Baba Sekou has echoed many times, is not drawing a line between what you consider your organization and the community, because that's a really difficult struggle when you see yourself as somehow special, higher than, different than the actual people, the community that you're trying to organize. And even within thinking through certain types of leadership, certain types of leadership qualities, right? All those questions become really obsolete if you've already separated yourself from the people that you're struggling with.
Okay. Oh, no, it's all good. It's all good. You know, is it? I don't know, but is it? This one? I don't.
Yeah, I got it on for you.
I could get loud. Hello. Hey, nah. You know, power to the people, man. All my questions kind of got asked just through conversation, but so it was kind of hard at going. Wait, I'm getting the question. Everybody come. I'm gonna fill this in out. You know what I mean? But it's all good. Well, nah, I still, but it still question remains, is that like Tupac, right? Tupac, he said that, you know, he probably wouldn't change the world, but he hope he sparks the flame in the person who does, you know. And I always feel like I was sparked by Tupac, you know. And I know your relationship. Come on, you know what I mean. And you know, I know y'all have a relationship with his mother, but also like what you were saying, it was as far as like with Malcolm X, I was sparked by the fact that, like, you know, he wasn't like so much passive. He was willing to push, you know, and that was like a superhero to me. You know, it was like, oh man, I can be strong. And then it was like, you know, and then as a formerly incarcerated person, it was like Malcolm X getting out and becoming a leader in the community, you know. And then so like, you know, getting out and then being a leader, but then it's like also like people like Dylan, right? Who told me to read this and read that and expand my knowledge, you know. So that sparked a whole lot in me, you know, to like be hungry to learn more about movement. Dylan introduced me to learning about Fred Hampton. You know, like I was in your class that I learned, you know. And then like Vanya, you know, she gave me the opportunity to get involved in the community, you know, through All of Us or None and backpack drive giveaways and, you know, getting involved in the community. And then it's still people like Brother Michael right here who gets out and starts stuff and pushing to make a change, you know, still, you know. So it's like you said, like it's all these things that spark me, you know. And I was just wondering, like, you know, sometimes like we know all these big names, like you were saying, but who are some of the unsung heroes that named always didn't hit the newspaper, but that was very much influential in the movement?
Oh, there were so many. I mean, where do I start? Lumumba Shakur, his brother and his father, Zaid, his brother Zaid, his father, Salahuddin Shakur. They were, Salahuddin Shakur was a early partner of Malcolm when he was in the Black Panther, the Black Muslim organization, Nation of Islam, that's what I'm trying to say. He was with him back in the 50s, late 50s when he first came out and started his ministry. And he was the first one that introduced me to Malcolm. And when I come home from prison in 1963, he gave me books, told me, read this. And I got some more that you can read, but first read this and let me know that you understood what you read, and I got some more for you. And that's how he would feed me. He would give me a book, I read it, I come back, and then he'd quiz me on it to make sure I really understood what I read or that I really read it. And then he'd give me another book. And most of it was about history and historical figures like Patrice Lumumba, people like that, Garvey, different people that he gave me books about, historical books around in Africa, Timbuktu, the Egyptians. He had a collective, what do you call it, a collective reading list that he would just randomly pick different things and hand them to me when I come back with something. And then I spent a lot of time with him. He was a vendor. He used to go around the country setting up his table and selling different jewelry and African imports and imports and stuff like that. And I worked with him, and he was always talking to me and inspiring me to get involved, you know. He the one that told me first, go hear Malcolm for yourself. It ain't enough just you read about him and listen to me tell you. You could go up there and you can catch him any day when he's in New York, standing on a platform on the corner talking. Go hear him. And I did that, and it was really inspirational. So it was people like that that kind of, and you probably never heard of Saladin Shakur, Baba Odinga. I could start naming people, Janice Cyril, Sophia Bakari, Abdul Majid, Noah Washington. I mean, there's so many people that were inspirational in my life and that I think needs to be talked about. Their work that they done should be talked about, but you can't talk about everybody. Because across the country, there were hundreds, if not thousands of people that were doing good work, that were sacrificing just like the rest of us. But like you say, you never heard about them. For one reason or another, a few of us names have been raised up. But we wasn't doing nothing extraordinary. We was doing, I mean, you might think it was extraordinary because today you don't know that many people who were doing it. But back then, the Panther Party was full of it. The Revolutionary Action Movement was full of it. You asked me about the Deacons of Defense, you know. These were regular people that stood up and did the same things we did. You just never heard their names, but they were as inspiring in their areas as we were in our areas, and probably did more than a lot of us did. We just didn't hear about them, you know.
Yeah, and I think. That's such a great question, because we live in a society that's really about cult of the personality and just highlighting some people and commodifying others. So we never really learned the truth about any of it. So to add to, I think about Baba Herman Ferguson and Mama Yalua Ferguson, right? They were educators who took over in the school system in New York City, in Brooklyn. And not everybody has written books. So because we're here on a college, I would say, there are so many women who are unsung heroes, right? So I think of, everyone knows the name Paul Robeson. The spirit of Mandela stands on the shoulders carrying the work of what William Patterson and Paul Robeson did. But how many people know about Islanda Robeson, his wife, right? People talk about W.E.B. Du Bois, but how many people know about Shirley Graham Du Bois, who reminded us that we must never forget that the wealth of this nation is built on the genocide of one nation and the enslavement of another nation, right? But we don't speak her name because we don't necessarily know of her, because her name is not bantered about in the other ways. Ella Baker, right? Florence Jo Kennedy, right? These were radical revolutionary women. Fannie Lou Hamer. Some have books about them. Some people don't, but we all contribute to this movement. No one stands by themselves. People often say Assata Shakur, they chant her part of her poem. But Assata doesn't stand by herself. She is a part of a history of a Black radical tradition and a movement. And so we cannot, separate people from that. Rosa Parks, some people may know, until that woman, I think her name was Jeannie Tortori, some people can help me out, right? She did The Rebellious Life of Rosa Parks. People thought she was a tired old elder who just didn't want to get up. No, she was an organizer. She was fighting and defending black women against the rape by white men in the South, white boys and white men in the South. She's a radical revolutionary woman who believed in armed self-defense. But how many people know that? Because we don't get to say those names. We don't get to study those lives. So I say those names in this lexicon here because I want people to know that there are sisters, right, that contribute just as much, right, and that we have to speak their names and read her stories and know their contributions, and we're all a part of that movement for freedom.
I want to keep it open for the panel if you all want to raise any other points. We have about 15, a little bit less than 15 minutes left, but we've curated this group here, so I want to give you all the privilege of continuing if you like.
I'd like to hear from the audience.
Okay, yeah, I know that we've got some folks that I know are bubbling with questions. Yeah? Okay, cool. I saw your hand first. Introduce yourself if you don't mind.
Hi, my name is Tristan Wilkerson. I'm a student here. There's no major in college for revolutionary struggle, and there probably never will be or has been, So what would you say is the modern day skill set that we need to get the job done? You know what I'm saying? Not just to keep it, of course it's something to keep going, but I think we're all very eager to get the job done. What does that look like? What's the skill set that's going to carry us there?
You getting with other students, other people that you know that want to get the job done. Identifying what the job is. What's the problem? What is the problem that you recognize that you would like to work on? And find someone else who's working on it already or want to work on it, and organize yourselves and organize others to work on that problem and to accomplish the goals that you set out to, or at least take steps forward to set it out. You might not, like I said earlier, you might not bring it to completion, but start it. You start the long march towards it, and get involved in it, So that's what I would say. I think the other panel can give their answers. Or
I think that's a great answer, but I also think it's understanding that everybody's not going to do the same thing, right? Everybody has something to contribute, and so figuring out where, as we say, get in where you can fit in, right? The Black Panther Party was above ground, the Black Liberation Army was underground. So we all have a different role to play, but having the analysis in the context and the vision, and then, like Sekou says, the agenda is so important, right?
what's the brother straight in the back there? I seen that hand over there. Earl.
Oh, okay, all right. Thank you very much. Coincidentally, in 1976, I heard Angela Davis talk here on this campus, very similar to this conversation. And I heard that great question about everybody wants to get the job done. If I heard her talking about this in my 20s, and I'm hearing you guys talk about racial unity and the struggle today, is it a generational thing and the job never gets done because each new generation of folks need to be taught cultural tolerance, or will someday we get there and the struggle is not so necessary?
I think someday we'll get there. I have absolute belief that the people will eventually free themselves, But then there'll be other problems gonna come on. I mean, that's life. Life brings about different challenges. So it'll always be challenges, but corporate capitalism, 1% controlling the 99%, that can be changed, and it will be changed at some point, I do believe that, yeah. So, but it can be, like I said, it can be done and it will be done. You know.
Folks, you know what we're gonna do? We're gonna ask maybe 3 or 4 people to ask questions consecutively, and then we'll kind of close out just asking Baba Sekou just to respond as he wishes to those sets of questions. So I'm gonna bounce over here. I apologize for all y'all that are not gonna get to ask questions on camera, but we have a little bit of
Yeah,
time
we
still
do
over
have-
here. Please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Okay.
2, 3, 4.
Kind of going back to Tristan's question, when we're looking at maybe the modern day skill set, and Brother, you said it yourself, when we do get to the point where we are in those spaces where we have our elders really strong in those spaces, do you think you can speak a little bit more about that, please?
Rocio. I'm an older student. I'm here because I have a beautiful struggle. I'm here to make change for not only my lineage, but for the people, for the communities that I was raised in. I think that that's a big acknowledgement. I want to shout out my professor. This is my first time taking her class. She doesn't run that narrative of me, you know, like a lot of these students sometimes do here. It's do the work on your own, figure out the answer on your own. I've been thankful to find Discord and have a lot of people and community that want to help students succeed. Some professors don't. They don't care about the beautiful struggle. They say get the work done. So my question is, how do we have these conversations? How do we have these conversations? How do we make the change? And I think you're right. Grassroots, it doesn't get any than me shaking my voice, or it doesn't get any realer than, you know, getting in people's face. So I want to just highlight that that's important, even though I know that's probably what you're going to say, but how do we even start these conversations?
We'll get one more question, and then Baba Sekou, if you don't mind closing us out.
Okay. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Baba. Thank you for gracing us with your presence. My name is Othandoyam Kopoka. I am from Cape Town, South Africa, and I'm a student at UCR. My question is, I come from a country where the current government is the former Liberation Party, the African National Congress, the oldest liberation party on the African continent, you know, the party of your Nelson Mandelas, your Oliver Tambos, and all of those people. But I also come from a country where they are in leadership and power now, but we see the continued killing of Black people. We see the continued incarceration of political prisoners from the Pan-Africanist Organization, for example, and APLA soldiers of their armed wing, who are sharing prisons and prison cells with former assassins of Chris Hani, for example, former assassins of Bantu Stephen Biko, for example, right? So I think what I'm trying to allude to here is there's a situation in the post-colonial period, the post-independent period, where former liberation parties, former liberation organizations are selling out, right? They are more and more liberalized, more and more committed to an anti-Black capitalist society. And how do we have those uncomfortable conversations where we ask others to step aside? You know, their time is up. We've tried, yes, we've tried, you know, speaking peacefully. I'm an African person, and respect of your elders is a fundamental thing, right? But your time is up. It's resulting in our continued death and lack of our survival, right? And what happens in those situations, for example, in the post-independent period in places like Burkina Faso, where we think there's been an achievement of liberation and Thomas Sankara gets assassinated, or we think in the Congo that there's a process of liberation and Patrice Lumumba gets assassinated, or Winnie Mandela continues to be harassed by the police, right? So my question is, how do we sharpen the contradictions in the post-independent period, right? How do we point out those pitfalls that Fernand speaks about in his book on the pitfalls of national consciousness, where he sort of predicts this phenomenon, right? How are we able to have that honest conversation? And how important is political and theoretical framework in ensuring that we don't repeat the same mistakes as before. Thank you. Thank you very much.
That's great. I don't know, those are some in-depth, serious questions, you know. I think in terms of dealing with your elders, I think we have to just create space for your elders, create organizations to do what needs to be done, and invite your elders there for advice. Invite them for historical context. Invite them to participate and be a part of struggles. But I think it is important that the youth take the leadership, that the youth lead, and that they go forward. As far as how do you push aside these, what do you call them, these colonial helpers, these collaborators, these brothers and sisters who want to be like their former oppressors. That's a hard one, sis. I don't know how. I mean, other than picking up the gun and running them out. You know, I mean, a lot of times that's what we have to do. We have to make the decision that you're going to go by any means necessary, just like we told the colonizer that he has to go by any means necessary. I'm looking for the word, the colonizers, neo-colonialists. The neo-colonialists, we have to be willing to tell the neo-colonialists that they got to go too. And then we have to organize to get rid of them. Of course, they're not going to leave. As long as we have a capitalist world, we're going to have people going to go for themselves, because that's what capitalism is all about. It's trying to enrich yourselves. They don't care about the next one, you know. So I believe we're going to have to build some sort of socialist world, not just one country, but I'm going to talk about the general economic system of the world like it is today, capitalism, and someday it's going to have to be socialism. And it's going to be up to us, the people, to create that. Because as long as a leader can get in a position to enrich himself in this capitalist system, you're going to find something that's going to do it. That's going to always be the case. So we got to take that incentive from them, you know, and build a different kind of world, deal a better world, a better system. Sister, I forget what your question was.
You're chiming in on it right now. You're talking about how do we get out of this need. I'm in an institution where I have professors who don't teach that, but there's some that do. There's some of us, they look at us just like this professor said, just numbers. I'm just a number. So I'm here to change this. How do we have it?
I'm going to let her take that.
Thank you. One, I would like to say thank you, babe. Freedom is a constant struggle. So even when people believe like that it was the end of apartheid, that didn't mean it was the end of the struggle, right? Here we had a Black Power movement, a civil rights movement, we had all of that, but people forgot that freedom is a constant struggle. So even when you think, quote, you have arrived, you have to still struggle to make sure that the people who are in leadership are still accountable to the people so that they know that they didn't get there by themselves and they still have a responsibility to the people. So that's one thing. We don't just arrive at freedom. We don't just win. We continue to struggle for it. The other thing, sister, I just retired from the Department of Miseducation, right, in New York City. And I call it miseducation deliberately because what is happening to Black and brown children is miseducated and undereducated, right? So my students used to take my class and they would say, I want to stay in your class because I learn more in your class than I do in all the other classes. I would tell them, you take what you get from this class and you use it in those other classes, right? So you look out, you seek out the professors that give you, that share that help in your human, political, social development, and you go take those other classes so that you counter those what's going on in those classes with what you got from the professors that give you what you need, what you want, and what you deserve. Because these institutions are not meant, they are not liberated zones. They are not liberation zones. And so they're never going to teach us what we need to liberate ourselves. But when you get a professor that's standing in front of you that does, then you race to take those classes because you know that that's what they have to offer. But you still got to take those other classes because you need those 140 credits, right?
I'm gonna let Steph, you close us out with Baba Sekou.
Thank you. I definitely don't profess to have anywhere near the same level of wisdom. But I just want to appreciate the questions about the hows and the what skills and what do we do. The massive amount of information that I learned from where I am now in my organizing life to where I started really, for me, was about not only developing some kind of political information for the past, seeing it as a blueprint, but really the truth is you just have to start. Yes. And once you start, obviously, as we've spoken here on this panel, there are going to be pitfalls, there are going to be mistakes, but there's also going to be a lot of successes and a lot of victories. And victories really fuel and inform us about what needs to happen next. And the anxiety and the angst around how do we do what we need to do? What are the skills that we need? The truth is that we can look to those who have already done it, but they also don't live in our same political context. They don't face the same questions. So we've got to come up with that as we go. And the conversation around freedom being a constant struggle means that constantly we're going to have to develop new skills, new tactics, new ways that we organize communities. And part of that is looking to each other to really, again, identify what the problem is and see what are the mechanisms that we have to address that.
Okay. Let me just say,
Baba Sekou, close us out, please.
I'm going
Thank
to
you.
just say thank you. I wanted to thank all the people that was rushing out of the door. I'm sorry that we didn't get a chance to thank them. But thank you all for coming and joining us and making this a lively conversation. And I really appreciate seeing so many people out in the audience. You know, it was really this has been a great visit. I'm really proud to be
Can we
a part.
thank Dekwi and Baba Sekou, please?
A part of you all.
Thank you, everybody, for coming through. We're gonna get a picture together, and then I have to get Baba Sekou and Dekwi on a car back to LA in the next 20 minutes. So folks can say what's up. You can do that thing, linger around here for a minute. But I apologize in advance if I have to rush them out of here in maybe 10 minutes or so. Thank you again, everyone.